Hi, it's Katie Mackenzie, mortgage professional with TMG The Mortgage Group, and your host of I Love Vancouver Real Estate. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Most of our listeners are potential home buyers or existing homeowners with the hope of upgrading to a larger home to accommodate a growing family. With this and the tightening of mortgage lending rules comes the need to engage with a trusted advisor who can lead and implement your financial strategy to get to these goals and achieve these goals. Someone that works collaboratively to ensure your business and personal wealth are well aligned. Someone like Jennie Weeks, who's a certified financial planning professional. So welcome, Jennie.
Thanks for having me, Katie.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So tell our listeners a bit about you, what you do, why of what you do.
Okay. Well, first of all, nice to be here and to be sharing this with all the listeners out there. I went into financial planning 6 years ago, and I think like everyone, we don't really know what we're getting ourselves into when we start out in a career. I found myself enjoying the piece where I help my clients to really understand their financial situation. Mm-hmm. So where other advisors might spend a lot of time looking at investments, what I've discovered is that from the experience of working with people is that our financial picture is such a big part of our lives. And what I mean by that is that our daily habits affect our finances. Mm-hmm. And most of us aren't making real, true conscious decisions. We're making unconscious decisions. So what I like to do is to help people have a foundation so that they can understand their financial picture, because people know what they need. They know better than I do. So if I can give them a foundation to make decisions, then I know that they will make the right decisions. Mm-hmm. So that's what I love about what I do and why I do it.
So how do you initially start working with a client? What's that experience like for the client? How do they approach you, reach you?
That's a good question. What I've found, it's taken a while, what I've found is that the best thing is for a client to come and sit down with me. If they're referred by somebody like yourself, mm-hmm. I will always sit down with them for an hour and hear their story and the issues that they have. And what I do is I do my best to find out as much as I can about them and the questions that they need answered about their finances. And I put together a proposal for them, mm-hmm. outlining how I can help them. And once they receive that proposal, they either know that I've nailed it. I know that this person can help me. And along with that would be the steps that need to be taken, as well as a price if there's a fee-for-service component to it. Mm-hmm. And again, that just depends on the situation. Yeah. And then we engage from there. That's how it works.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So let's tie this back to, particularly how it relates to home ownership. And for our listeners, more about strategies around saving for that down payment for first-time home buyers or saving to upgrade for growing families into a larger home or larger space. So how do you approach that specific strategy, financial strategy within their plan?
Mm-hmm. Home ownership for most people is a very important goal in their life. And it's such a challenge here in Vancouver because it's so expensive.
Absolutely.
So understanding how that goal fits into their overall plan is probably the first step. Mm-hmm. And so that's looking at, what their income is, what their expenses are, and what they can afford. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's a really key. And I think what's important is if people understand what the sacrifice is to get into their home because it's important, and to know if over the long term that's still going to fit into their plan. Mm-hmm. And again, it comes back to that conscious decision. If consciously they know what they need to do to get there, they will be motivated. Mm-hmm. And so that's sort of the first step. And then, of course, there's all these different tools that we have available to us through CMHC financing and the home buyers plan through the RSP.
Yes. I mean, a lot of clients approach asking about withdrawing from their RSPs. And they'll say, well, I have these RSPs, but I've been told don't touch them. Don't take them out under the home buyers plan. And I always ask, why not? And to be clear, we don't offer tax advice, but in my limited exposure, which is more than limited, I know that you're moving from a tax sheltered vehicle to another tax sheltered vehicle. And in this market, it's an absolute opportunity to use your RSPs under that home buyer's plan. So, what do you see your clients doing in that regard?
I have had many clients use the home buyer's plan, and I do highly recommend it. Mm-hmm. The home buyer's plan allows, in the case where there's two people buying a home, or mm-hmm. one, it's $25,000 per person. Now, it's a lifetime amount. You only get to use it once. Okay? What it does is it lets you take money from your RSP, which is tax advantage money. You didn't have to pay income tax on that money. Mm-hmm. Okay? And you can use that as a down payment on a home. Mm-hmm. And if you've got two people and it's $50,000, what can that do for you? Mm-hmm. And that's where I would say
it can get you into the market.
Yeah. So let's talk to the people out there a little bit about what that means. Mm-hmm. What does $50,000 do? Because I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're looking at a first-time homebuyer couple, $50,000 is well within the minimum down payment required for something $500,000 or less, and that can get you into a one-bedroom condo downtown Vancouver. I saw a listing come up yesterday, actually a friend's listing in Burnaby, beautiful two-bedroom, well-maintained unit, and it's well under $500,000, and that down payment would get a couple in. I mean, other application details aside, mm-hmm. Accessing that RSP money is money that they wouldn't otherwise have and not be able to get in.
Yeah, so that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things not everybody knows is it's not a big cost to pay it back. It's about, you pay it back over 15 years, so it works out to be a little less than $1,500 a year that you mm-hmm. need to pay back. Now, of course, you don't get the tax deduction of that because you already got it once. Mm-hmm. But $1,500 a year, and then over and above that, you're still going to be able to contribute RSPs that are tax deductible going forward.
So we're talking to the clients that have an RSP and have anywhere from $0 to $25,000. What about people that haven't started saving for their down payment? That true, let's say, right out of university into their first job. What would you recommend they do in terms of starting an RSP and getting that in play to get ahead to save for a down payment?
I definitely think that an RSP is the best place to start. Depending on how much money you earn, for every $100 you put in your RSP, you're paying less tax, mm-hmm. right? 30% savings possibly. Mm-hmm. So it's a very everybody should start one of those first. Mm-hmm. I see no reason not to. For somebody right out of university, you can go to the bank, start off there. You do want to make sure though that you have the right risk profile for any investment that you go into for an RSP. So an example of that would be if you think you can save your $25,000 in your RSP over a 3-year period, then your money's only going to be invested for 3 years. So you may not be able to go into something really, really risky. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you do need to look at the time horizon for your investment. Mm-hmm. I mean, even if your parents are planning to lend you money, they could still use your RSP, and at least you'd have then a tax deduction mm-hmm. over that 3-year period, potentially. Mm-hmm. So they can flow it in and out. Now, there are some rules about how long the money has to be in your RSP and when you take it out, when you buy. Mm-hmm. So be careful and make sure that you're working with an institution that's going to give you the right information about that.
CRA website also has the direct links and information. It can be quite cumbersome to read through that, but we'll put the link to that specific home buyer's plan CRA website in the show notes when the podcast comes out so people can see that directly, because they are our number one direction for policies. And it used to be $20,000 that we can only take, and then the government did change that to $25,000. So those rules can and will change as time goes on. But yeah, I see a lot of people doing it, and it gets them just that little step farther into the home that they wanted in the location that they wanted. I used it myself when I bought my first condo, and much to the disappointment of my father, but I have since repaid it as well. But it enabled me to get into the market in a time where everyone thought I was crazy for buying, a condo on the west side for, under under $300,000 that's worth, shy of $1 million today, but I did sell it. But it is leverage. And, as a financial planner, you would recommend that leverage over lines of credit or credit cards, right?
The thing is that what all you've done is transferred from being invested in one type of an investment to now being invested in your own home. And we don't know what the market's going to do. It can go up and down. Mm-hmm. And real estate is actually considered a higher risk investment. What we see here in Vancouver has sort of been an anomaly. But you're transferring from one investment to another investment. Mm-hmm. Now you've invested in yourself. Mm-hmm. So it's still sheltered. Mm-hmm. So it's a brilliant strategy. And, if our listeners can take anything away, maybe they'll be excited to know that they can use, maybe even the contributory RSP plan at work. Mm-hmm. So you can use a group plan that's an RSP plan, or the money that they already have. And maybe they'll come away from this going, wow, I didn't know that I actually had money for a down payment.
Mm-hmm. Or depending on the school of thought in the home that they were brought up, they may have been taught that this is a savings for retirement, don't touch it, So, we're talking about saving for down payment or to get into a larger home. Now, what about those who are in their home? They're settled, they're happy, they figure they'll be there for life. Their kids are either grown or growing and almost out of the house. And, they may or may not still have a mortgage. So they want to come to you and work with you to diversify their portfolio. They don't just want real estate investments or secondary homes, a chalet in Whistler or cottage on the seashell. Or how do you work with your clients in that regard to then build their wealth in another way and diversify their portfolio?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. So we've sort of moved from the entry-level first-time buyer into people who perhaps have already been in real estate for a decade or so in Vancouver that are in a very different situation and are now settled and looking at how am I going to make it in the long term? Mm-hmm. How do I manage my wealth through retirement? Mm-hmm. And I think that the most important piece of this is to know what your number is. Okay? And what I mean by that is that everyone's is different. Depends on your lifestyle. Depends on where you want to live. It depends on how long you want to work. But everyone's number it's this magic number that you reach that says, I don't have to work anymore.
Ah. I need to know my number, even though I love what I do.
That's right. And really, everyone wants to know what that number is. And when you know and it's clear, it gives you something to work towards. Mm-hmm. Now, for some people, this number is $10 million. Mm-hmm. For other people, it's $2 million. Mm-hmm. For some, it's only $500,000. It's personal and it's different. And that's what I do is I help people understand what that number is, and then we create a strategy to get there. Okay? We always use tax efficiency. You should trust that the planner you're working with is going to drive you to tax efficiency first, mm-hmm. which is using the registered vehicles that are available to you. Or if you're an incorporated professional, maybe you're using a different strategy. Mm-hmm. So I can't kind of give you one answer. In the end, it's going to be about you being motivated to put the cash flow aside to reach those numbers. Mm-hmm. Okay? And then the other piece is understanding your risk. Everyone's different. I met a lady yesterday who's leaving the country who will only put her money into guaranteed income certificates, which are paying, depending on how long, 0.5% to 1%. Very, very low risk, and not even meeting inflation. So the younger you are, generally the more risk you can take. Mm-hmm. And I do recommend that as much exposure as you can have, you want to do when you're younger. It's got one thing that we see over the markets over time, just like the real estate market, is markets are cyclical. And if you don't need the money, you can take a little more risk and you can get through the cycles mm-hmm. and come out with growth at the other end. Mm-hmm. Okay? And when I talk to clients about investing, I actually expose them to more things than just your standard stocks or mutual funds or bond funds, but also to mortgage income corporations, sometimes rental revenue. There's also, some private equity out there. Mm-hmm. So depending on the sophistication of the client, their risk level, their education level, mm-hmm. I think what's important is that you're getting exposed to everything. and understanding it.
Feedback I get from clients is that they go and approach an advisor and they're met with sort of a cookie cutter approach that everyone would experience the same way. You know, I go in, I get the experience. My neighbor goes in, they get the same experience. So I like what you're saying is that it's tailored completely and totally to that client, and first and foremost to what their number is, what their lifestyle is, what their objective is, what their risk tolerance is, that it's completely tailored.
Yeah.
And then the pieces would then just fit inside of that.
Yeah, no, I've heard that too. I go in and I fill out a little form, and then what pops out the other end is that this is what you should invest in. But that's actually not the question people are asking.
Yeah.
And the investment piece is one piece of the whole pie.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's you actually have to go through a whole bunch of information before you even get to choosing what the investment is.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the important piece.
It would be like the mortgage. Everyone comes in and asking what the rate is.
Yes.
And I say, well, no. Let's start with what's most important to you in regards to your mortgage. And they say, what does that mean? And I'm like, that's the right question. Mm-hmm. You know, what is important and what may or may not occur in your life. And so, you know, all those questions should be looked at and reviewed.
Yes.
And then the resulting rate with the right lender comes out.
Yeah. And actually, this brings us back to part of the question, which I didn't answer, which is also about, you know, people that want to get into larger homes, which we touched briefly on. And when you're talking now about mortgages, one of the things that I've seen is a kind of a mortgage whereby as you repay the principal, it opens up credit for you to use. And depending how old you are, there are some wonderful strategies that you can use with the credit that you get exposed to every month to invest. So it's much higher risk. I don't want to go into the details, but there are, when you're young, some wonderful strategies out there that you can use.
So you'd be talking about using a home equity line of credit, as it's commonly known in the industry, for a special type of investment strategy.
And also, I really like lines of credit. Okay, I think they're really important. When we sit down with people to do planning work, one of the things we need to know is that you've got exposure to cash. Okay, so if you have an assessment on your condo, if you have a new roof you need to replace, or your hot water tank breaks, or whatever it is, and you're stretched in your mortgage payments and you don't have a lot of money left over, and everything you're investing is going into your RSPs, well, you don't have what we call access to liquidity. But if you have a line of credit, you do. And for emergencies, lines of credit are very healthy. Because if you don't have a line of credit for emergency, then you actually need to keep cash in the bank, not being invested. So I, in my planning work with clients, will say, if you're comfortable with it, I am, let's have your line of credit be your liquidity fund. And then we can invest the other money and have it growing for you over the long term.
Absolutely.
So going back to mortgages, that's important pieces to it.
So I'll put you on the spot, because I know our listeners will probably want to ask you this question. Do you contribute to your RSP or pay down your mortgage? I get asked this all the time, and I'm like, I can't answer this, because it really ties back to tax advice. Can you speak to it? Yeah. Okay. Well, let's start off with this really, really simple concept. Okay. If you're making $100,000 a year, okay, and at the end of the year you put $10,000 in your RSP, you're probably going to get a check from the government for after you do your tax return for $3,500. So now you've turned $10,000 into $13,500. If you pay down your mortgage with that same $10,000, it's just $10,000. So you're actually creating more cash flow for yourself because that money would have otherwise gone to pay taxes. Okay, so quite simply, you could take that $3,500 and pay down your mortgage now, or you could take that extra $3,500 and put it in a tax-free savings account. So you've created more money. That's number one. Okay. The second part to it is that the interest rate on your mortgage is probably lower than your long-term return in a long-term investment. Okay. So if you're invested in equities, we've seen over time that those equity returns would outperform the interest rate on your mortgage. Because most clients we see now, or anyone that's done anything in the last 5, is, sub threes for sure. So sub 3%.
Yeah. So an individual decision, but based on those two concepts, both of those tell me that you should be investing in your RSP beforehand, before you paying down your mortgage.
But again, a conversation to come in and have, and opportunity cost, I guess, of that cash, right? Let's put it in the place that fits within the plan as well.
You know, then you talk to somebody that's got a $1.5 million mortgage, and yes, they exist out there, who's maybe had a bumper of a year, and they've had to pay tax, and they've maxed out their RSPs, and then they say, you think I should put $200,000 down on my mortgage? Now, this is obviously doesn't happen to everyone, but it does happen. And I would say, yeah, maybe, you know, because you've already got a lot of other investments there outside. And the one thing I will tell you is when people don't have a mortgage anymore, they have a lot of money to save.
Yeah.
So at the same time, paying down your mortgage is important. You know, I actually think the best thing to do is those bi-weekly payments that shorten your amortization.
Yes.
I highly recommend that because I think you don't notice that money.
It's the number one strategy that we try and help clients employ because it changes an amortization on average from 25 years down to 21 years and 6 months. And I also say psychologically, paying a smaller payment every 2 weeks is easier than one larger monthly payment. So we always use that. So, Jennie, why are you different? What makes you different? So, you know, there's 1,001 of me. There's 1,001 of you. Why you?
Oh, that's always a hard question.
I know, right?
It's a really hard question, but I do think I bring something different to the table. So first and foremost, I can do fee-only planning, which is unique. So when people come and sit down with me, I can invest their money for them. But if they're very happy with where their money's invested, or maybe they're threatened by, or maybe they feel that by sitting down with me and getting another opinion or getting a plan done that they're going to have to move their investments. And this is a problem in our industry. So to come in and have an unbiased opinion given to them, that's one thing that does make me different. And I can do that because I'm a certified financial planner. Okay? And not all investment advisors are. It's a difference there.
Correct.
That's one thing. The second piece is that I've been an advocate all my life. And I bring that to what I do. And my goal is to see people's financial picture through their lens. Not my lens, through their lens. And then to advocate for coming up with the best way to solve or plan for their financial picture. Okay? And so in doing that, I like to work as almost like the team leader to bring in all their advisors. So when you get into more complex planning or simple planning, if you're a home buyer and you've got a mortgage broker, and if your mortgage broker says to you, you can afford a $500,000 mortgage, and then your financial planner says, no, you can't. You've got fear. Why is one telling me one thing and one telling me another?
And both are now discredited.
Exactly. And then your accountant's saying, no, you shouldn't do your home buyer's plan or something.
Yeah.
So the reason things like that happen is because you've got different lenses looking at your problem. All right. An accountant looks at it differently than a mortgage broker, than an investment advisor. As a financial planner, if I can understand what you want, and we know you're going to get there because we've looked at a 5-year, 10-year, 20, 30-year plan, and then communicate with your other advisors so everyone's on the same page, everyone's on the same path, you're not going to get these mixed messages. And that's my goal for my clients, and I think that makes me a little bit different.
I know in the clients that we've worked together, you work very collaboratively. And so that the client feels wrapped. They feel safe, secure, and as though they're in the lead and everyone is behind them, you know, to ensure that their goals are being met.
Well, yeah, and it's tricky because we're all experts in our own way. Right? And there's an overlap. And that's why this confusion happens for clients, because there's an overlap. So, you know, what I strive to do is to be that person that the client can come to me and say, well, why is this being said? And that they can trust it. That's who I want to be, that person, that trusted person that they can ask and know that there's the only reason for that answer is for them. It's not because I want to make money off of them. Is that right? And so with the fee planning piece, it's like a consultant. They pay me hourly, and I give them the best possible advice by analyzing all of the things. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that word second opinion gets thrown around so easily. And I hear of people who are working with, in any profession, they're engaged with a professional that they don't really feel they can trust. Yet they feel nervous to approach anyone else because, again, they're not feeling trusted in that existing relationship. How am I going to find another person? So, my messaging would be to our listeners is reach out to Jennie. Ask for that review and see if you're unhappy where you are, don't stay. Same thing, we get people calling saying, oh, I'm so unhappy with XYZ bank. And it's like, well, let's look at it. Can we move it? Can we get you somewhere where you are getting the advice you want and need and get you farther ahead financially? Well,
yeah. And actually that kind of brings a question for you in all of this. And one of the things that I see out there doing my planning is that when you're looking at a situation with a couple who's buying a home in this very expensive real estate market and they're stretched, where do you look at their overall plan in that picture? Because there's two things, right? There's what they'll give you and what you can afford.
Correct.
So tell me a little bit about how you handle that one.
I see it on both sides. You have clients that come in and want the absolute maximum they can afford, and you look at that number, and they want to take that and run with it, and they do. And then you get clients that are coming in and they say, here's what we're paying now, say a rental, here's what we're paying now, $1,500 a month. We know that in going into home ownership, a portion of our payment is going towards the equity of our new home. So therefore we can stomach an increase in our monthly amount, say to $2,000 a month. So then we work backwards. So out of your $2,000 comes your mortgage payment, principal and interest, taxes, heating, strata fees, if those are applicable. And then you work backwards to then, based on their down payment amount, what their purchase price is. There's nothing in the middle. It's one extreme or the other. Yeah. And what we have seen too is I will get referrals from clients who are actually offended by walking in, getting pre-approved for, $1 million and are told what the payment on that might be given that financial offering, that interest rate. And they'll say, but that's way over what we want to afford. They're actually offended by that. So it's quite interesting, and why I do what I do is because I'm independent and can be objective. I can say, here's what you've asked of me based on what your needs are, your wants are, and your comfort level with those payments are, and introduce, what happens if you need a special assessment paid for, what happens if you need a new roof paid for, and have those conversations. So yeah, you see people on one side or the other. There is no middle ground, really.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to this conscious decision making. So when I get the call from a client whose realtor has literally maxed them out, their realtor and their mortgage broker have maxed them out into a home. They don't have a dime left for savings necessarily. And the old rules used to allow for that. They don't as much anymore. There's a little bit more room. But that always concerns me a little bit. And it's not actually that person's fault, because there wasn't a conscious understanding around what the implications were of that purchase and that mortgage payment. It was, this is how much you can get, and now this is what you can afford to buy. That same person, their house has probably doubled for the last 3 or 4 years. So that's the other side of the coin, right? Is that it is still a leveraged investment, but it's also a home. And, I think it's this balance between cash flow and being comfortable and home ownership. It's a very delicate balance.
I think a lot of people are struggling with that balance right now, and a lot of people have been recently discouraged by the change in the mortgage lending rules. But again, for all of our listeners, just recommend reaching out, saying, can you look at my plan? Can you re-review my plan? Can you set me a plan? I don't have one. Can you look at my mortgage, review my mortgage? Just, that reaching out to a trusted professional. Is there anything else that our listeners today should know about you?
Well, I'm launching a new website. So that'll be out, I'm hoping, in the next month or so. So my new company is called Springtide North Wealth Advisory Collective.
Wow.
And I know it sounds very communist, which is not the intention. The reason it's called a collective is because I work with other professionals. We don't pay each other to work together. We're not part of the same association. We're there for the same reasons, right? So it's just about working with other advisors, whether it be accountants, mortgage brokers, legal team, your legal professionals, you name it. We bring those people into the conversation and do fee planning for people.
Great.
So that's coming out soon. And then my phone number, 604-961-5409. And it's Jennie Weeks, and I'm in Vancouver at Broadway and Granville.
Excellent. Well, thank you for coming in. I'm sure we've given our listeners a number of tidbits so they can chew on, and hopefully someone is out there listening and saying, I need to call Jennie today. But if you do have any other questions, please do feel free to reach out to Jennie or myself. And thank you for taking the time today. I'm Katie Mackenzie, mortgage professional with TMG The Mortgage Group, and your host of I Love Vancouver Real Estate.